That day started out like any other ordinary afternoon. I had just finished running errands and decided to stop by the park with my son. He had been begging me all week to go, and finally the weather was perfect. Clear skies, a soft breeze, and the sound of children laughing in the distance. I remember looking at his face, the way his eyes lit up when he saw the swings. He took off running, leaving me with a smile on my face as I walked slowly behind, carrying his little backpack and water bottle. For me, those small moments are priceless because kids grow up so quickly. One day they're holding your hand at every step, and the next, they want to run ahead and do everything on their own. I wanted him to enjoy the freedom, to laugh, to feel safe. But I didn't know that within minutes, something was about to happen that would make my blood boil. Something that would test my patience, my composure, and my role as a parent. I found a bench not too far from the swings, sat down, and started watching him play. He was trying to push himself higher on the swing, his legs pumping back and forth, and even from where I sat, I could hear him giggling. Everything seemed so perfect, so peaceful. But peace doesn't last forever when a Karen is nearby. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a woman. She was standing near the jungle gym, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, her expression twisted into the kind of disapproving frown that makes you feel judged even when you've done nothing wrong. Her clothes were neat, her hair pulled into a severe bun, and she carried herself like she owned the entire park. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was just another parent. Maybe she was waiting for her child. But then it happened. My son, full of energy and excitement, jumped off the swing a little clumsily. He ran toward the slide, his shoelace untied, almost tripping but catching himself just in time. He laughed and kept going, like kids do. That's when she snapped. Her voice sliced through the air like a knife. "Hey, watch where you're going! You almost ran into me!" I froze. My son had been nowhere near her, just full of innocent joy running toward the slide. But she wasn't done. She raised her voice again, sharp and condescending, the kind of tone that makes your skin crawl. "Don't you have any manners? Kids like you are why parks become dangerous. Where are your parents? Who even lets you run around like this?" I felt the air leave my chest. For a second, I stayed seated, stunned. My son had stopped in his tracks, his shoulders slumped, the happiness drained from his little face. He turned around slowly, confusion written all over him. He was too young to understand why a stranger would yell at him like that. Too young to know why someone who didn't even know his name was suddenly treating him as if he had done something terrible, and that's when the fire inside me lit up. You see, there's something about being a parent that changes you forever. The moment you see your child being humiliated, scolded, or treated unfairly, something primal awakens. My heart started racing, and I could feel the heat in my face, but I didn't move right away. I wanted to see what she would do next. Would she calm down? Would she realize she had overreacted? She didn't. Instead, she took a step closer to my son, towering over him like some self-appointed authority figure. Her finger pointed straight at his chest. "Don't you dare run like that again. You could hurt someone. Do you hear me? You need to learn respect." That was it. I couldn't sit any longer. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. My steps were calm but firm as I walked toward them, my eyes locked on her. She hadn't noticed me yet. My son's face lit up with relief the moment he saw me coming. But Karen? She kept going, ranting and lecturing, completely unaware that I was just a few feet away. And then I spoke. "Excuse me." Her body stiffened. She turned her head slowly, and the instant she saw me standing right behind her, her eyes widened. I'll never forget the way her expression shifted, from smug authority to sudden discomfort. My voice was steady, but inside, my blood was boiling. "That's my son you're shouting at." The silence that followed was deafening. The other, parents nearby, glanced over, sensing tension in the air. My son stood frozen, his little fists clenched, waiting for me to protect him. Karen blinked, her lips parting, searching for words. She clearly hadn't expected anyone to challenge her, much less the parent of the child she had just scolded. In that moment, I could have exploded. I could have shouted back, made a scene, and let my anger pour out like a storm. But instead, I decided to hold it, to let her feel the weight of her own actions before I said another word. I leaned slightly closer, my eyes never leaving hers. "You have something to say to him? Then you can say it in front of me?" She swallowed hard. The confidence she had seconds ago seemed to evaporate. For a brief moment, she looked away, as if searching for an escape. My son's eyes darted between us, fear and hope mixing in his small face. I reached out and placed my hand gently on his shoulder, reassuring him. And then, with calm but undeniable firmness, I repeated myself, "Do you have something to say to my child?" That question hung in the air, heavier than any shout or insult could ever be. And that's when I saw it, the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the realization that she wasn't in control anymore. She had yelled at the wrong kid because this time his parent was standing right behind her. I froze for a second, standing behind her trying to process what I had just heard. My son's small shoulders were hunched, his hands clutching his little backpack straps tightly as if holding onto them would somehow protect him. His lips trembled. But he didn't say anything back. He just stood there silently absorbing the storm of her anger. And that's when something inside me snapped. I couldn't let my child be spoken to like that, not by a stranger, not by anyone. "Excuse me," I said firmly, my voice steady but sharp. She turned, clearly not expecting anyone to be behind her, and the moment her eyes met mine, her expression shifted from anger to a mix of surprise and discomfort. "Oh," she stammered, her voice dropping just slightly. "I was just teaching him a lesson. Kids these days have no manners." I stepped closer, placing my hand gently on my son's shoulder to reassure him. His tiny body relaxed under my touch, but I could still feel the tension in him. I looked directly at her, unwilling to break eye contact. "You don't get to teach my son anything," I replied coldly, "especially not by yelling at him." Her eyes narrowed as if she couldn't believe I had challenged her. "Well," she said in a huff, "he almost bumped into me, and children need to learn respect. Parents like you don't discipline them enough. Someone has to say something." I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my voice controlled. "You don't know anything about my child or how I raise him. What you just did wasn't teaching. It was intimidation. He's a child. He deserves kindness, not cruelty." For a brief second, I saw her lips part as though she was about to snap back, but she noticed the people around us now watching. A few shoppers had paused, eyes darting between us, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation unfolding in the middle of the store. She crossed her arms defensively, muttering something about overprotective parents under her breath. I crouched, down to my son's level, ignoring her completely now. "Are you okay, buddy?" I asked softly. His big eyes looked up at me, still watery, but he nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "I didn't mean to almost hit her." My heart clenched. He was blaming himself for her cruelty. I gently brushed his hair back. "You didn't do anything wrong," I told him, my voice loud enough for her to hear. "Sometimes people forget how to be kind, but that doesn't mean you have to carry their anger." Her face flushed, whether from embarrassment or frustration, I couldn't tell. She scoffed loudly, muttered something about people being too sensitive these days, and stormed off, heels clicking against the floor as she disappeared down the aisle. For a moment, silence hung in the air. The tension slowly eased, and the onlookers returned to their shopping, though a few gave me small nods of approval, as if silently saying, "Good job standing up for him." I pulled my son into a hug, feeling his little arms wrapped tightly around my waist. He buried his face into my shirt, and I knew that even though the encounter had shaken him, he found safety in my embrace. As we walked through the store together, I couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. It wasn't just about my son almost bumping into her. It was about how quick some people are to lash out at children, forgetting that they are still learning, still growing, still figuring out the world. And honestly, it hurt me more than it angered me. Because one day, if moments like this piled up, he might stop seeing the world with the same bright eyes. He might begin to expect cruelty instead of kindness. And I wasn't about to let that happen. I decided then and there that this wouldn't be a moment that broke him. It would be a lesson. A lesson in how to rise above unkindness, how to see through someone else's bitterness without letting it plant roots inside you. "Do you know something, sweetheart?" I said as we reached the checkout line. He looked up at me curiously. "When people are angry like that, it's usually not about you at all. Sometimes they're carrying their own problems, and they just let it out on whoever is near. It wasn't your fault, okay?" He nodded slowly, but then asked, "But why was she so mean?" That question lingered. How do you explain to a child that some people let their pain spill out as anger? How do you tell them that sometimes kindness doesn't come naturally to everyone? I took a deep breath and answered in the simplest way I could. "Because she forgot something very important," I said gently. "She forgot what it feels like to be little. She forgot what it feels like to make mistakes and need understanding. And maybe she never had someone to remind her." He thought about that for a second, then asked, "So, she was mean because nobody was nice to her?" I smiled softly at his innocence, amazed by how children often see more truth than adults do. "Maybe," I admitted, "and that's why it's important that we remember to be kind even when others aren't." By the time we left the store, his hand firmly tucked in mine, I could feel the heaviness lifting from him. The sting of her words was still there, but it was fading, replaced with something stronger: resilience. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not just this incident, but the lesson behind it. I had to make sure my son grew up understanding that while the world may have people who shout, belittle, or criticize, he had the power to choose a different path. He had the power to rise above it. And little did I know, this was only the beginning. Because what happened next, just a few days later, would prove to me that even a child's heart can carry wisdom far beyond his years. 2 days later, something happened that I'll never forget. It was evening, and I had taken my son to the park. The sun was setting, painting the sky with strokes of orange and pink. Children ran around, laughter echoing through the air while parents sat on benches chatting or scrolling through their phones. My son was playing near the swings when I noticed another child, smaller, maybe 4 years old, trip and fall to the ground. His knees scraped against the rough gravel, and he immediately burst into tears. Before I could even react, my son ran toward him. He bent down, gently helping the boy up, brushing the dust off his little shirt. "It's okay," I heard him say softly. "You're not bad for falling. Everyone falls sometimes. You're still strong." The boy sniffled, eyes wide, clearly surprised at the kindness. My son gave him a reassuring smile, then helped guide him to the bench where his mother sat. I watched in silence, my heart swelling with pride and a lump forming in my throat. In that small, tender moment, he had done exactly what I hoped he would. He had chosen kindness, where another person might have chosen impatience or criticism. When he came running back to me, I knelt down and hugged him tightly. "That was beautiful," I whispered into his ear. "You helped him feel better." He shrugged shyly as if it wasn't a big deal, but then he said something that struck me deeply. "I didn't want him to feel the way I felt in the store. I know what that feels like. And it hurts." I pulled back, staring at his little face, his big, brown eyes filled with both innocence and wisdom. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the harshness of the world doesn't just leave scars. Sometimes it plants seeds of empathy. Sometimes it teaches children not to spread the same pain, but to break the cycle. The memory of that woman in the store still stung, but now it had a new layer. Because without meaning to, she had become a teacher, not by her cruelty, but by giving my son the chance to decide who he wanted to be in response to it. We sat together on the bench, watching the other kids play. I stroked his hair and said, "You know, kindness is like a superpower. Not everyone uses it, but the ones who do make the world better. Today, you used your superpower." He smiled, leaning against me, and whispered, "Then I want to use it every day." That night, as I tucked him into bed, I thought about how easy it is for adults to forget the weight of our words. A stranger's harsh tone can cling to a child's heart for days, weeks, maybe even years. But so can a gentle word, a moment of patience, a hand offered instead of a finger pointed. And I made a silent promise to myself to never let him forget that he has the choice to be the light in a world that sometimes chooses darkness. Because, here's the truth, people will always have their anger, their stress, their bitterness. Some will lash out without thinking about who's standing in front of them, even if it's just a child. But if I can raise my son to be the kind of person who chooses empathy over cruelty, who chooses understanding over judgment, then maybe, just maybe, we can tip the scales in the other direction. Maybe one small act of kindness can ripple outward, changing more than we know. As I kissed his forehead goodnight, I whispered a quiet prayer. Not that the world would be softer to him, but that he would always stay strong enough to remain soft in spirit, no matter how hard the world tried to shape him otherwise. Because kindness, I realized, isn't weakness. It's the bravest choice of all. And in that moment, looking at my son, I knew he had already learned that lesson better than most adults ever will.